I think this is one of the best thriller books I've ever read, and I don't know what that says about me, but if you're looking for the best thriller book recommendations, this video is for you. Hello, my name's Michaela. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where we talk about all things books. I like to think that thriller books are my bread and butter. They are my go-to genre. They are the books that every year, without fail, I read the most. I've been reading thriller books since I was a kid, probably before I should have been. But I like to think that my taste in thriller books is impeccable. Fight me. So if you're looking for the best thriller book recommendations, then look no further. This video is for you. Today we're going to be talking about the absolute best of the best, the creme de la creme of thriller books. Just know that every single book I'm going to recommend to you today, I'm recommending with my whole chest. So before we get into it, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Please hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. The first book we're going to talk about is one of the most criminally underrated books I think I'm going to speak about. I never hear anybody, and I mean anybody, speaking about this book, and that is Did You See Melody by Sophie Hannah. The book starts out and we meet Cara, and Cara has just escaped away from her family to a 5-star resort as she just needs some me time. She gets to reception, the receptionist gives her a key to her room, and she goes upstairs. So she lets herself into the room, but there's 2 people already in the room. So the receptionist has given her the wrong key. She sees this man and this young girl, and the young girl looks exactly like a girl named Melody, whose parents are in prison for killing her. So shockingly, unlike many thriller books, Cara does do the right thing and like raises the alarm bells and is like, there's this girl there, and people just make out like she's crazy. So did she really see her? I remember everything about this book. Like, I remember I was on holiday. I was in Morocco when I was reading this, and I think it was like in 2022. And I just remember having to know what happened. It was so twisty. It was so good. Go read this book. The next book is The Gathering by C.J. Tudor, which is actually the only 5-star book I've given C.J. Tudor, and it is her most recent release, so maybe it's a sign of things to come, hopefully. For everyone who likes vampires in your thriller books, this one's for you. This one, we meet a woman named Barbara. Barbara. And she has gone to an Alaskan town where vampires and humans live side by side. They're supposed to live like pretty peacefully, like the vampires keep themselves, they don't kill people, like that's the agreement that they've got, and the human people just kind of pretend they don't exist. However, Babs has been called in because the vampires apparently have been killing someone, and if Babs investigates it and finds out that the vampires have killed a human, the entire colony of vampires will be killed. The thing I really liked about this book is like the vampires and humans knew about each other. It wasn't a big secret, which is what I think you get mainly in books about vampires. Like the humans have no idea about them. And I just really liked that concept of them like living side by side. And also the head of the vampires in this book is a 700-year-old vampire, but she looks like a 9-year-old girl. That's terrifying. I actually think this book has got the potential to be a series as well, and I really hope it will be. The Family Experiment by my favourite author, John Marrs. Now, this is one of John Marrs's speculative fiction books. I always describe them as, if you like Black Mirror, that kind of thing. They're set in the very near future, and this one is no different because in the world of The Family Experiment, humans can no longer afford to have children because they are just so expensive. The cost of living is so high that people just can't afford it. So instead, virtual reality children have just been created, like Tamagotchis, but for kids. So you can put on a virtual reality headset and you can go to an alternate world where you have a virtual child that you can care for as a solution to this problem. And then we follow 8 couples who are going through the process of having their virtual child, and they're also on a game show. And if they win this game show, they get the money to win a real world child or keep their virtual baby forever. And honestly, I just think it's just the most interesting concept. It's full of mixed media. The audiobooks for these are actually really good as well because they're like full cast with sound effects, and these are my favourite books by John Marrs. This one was no different. I loved it. Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. Now this one's quite funny because I think I read this back in like 2021 or something along those lines. And I remember giving it 5 stars and I remember thinking it was so dark. But my friend Carly has literally just read this and like she was messaging me about the ending and I was like, I don't remember that happening. So apparently I've blocked the ending out of my mind. We meet Gio, who when she was 16, her childhood best friend Angela went missing and nobody knows what happened to her. We then fast forward to the future and Angela's remains have just been found in Gio's back garden. The person that gets arrested is actually Gio's ex-boyfriend Calvin. He's been found out to be a serial killer. There's a scene in this book that is like engraved into my mind. I swear I will never forget it. I'll forget the ending, just not that scene. Jennifer Hillier's books are just so good and I really want to read more from her in 2025. Right, now this one technically isn't a thriller book, so I'm kind of cheating here, but I think that if you're a fan of the thriller genre, you could like this. It's a non-fiction and it's called Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepherd. Dr. Richard Shepherd was actually a forensic pathologist. He was one of the top forensic pathologists in the UK and he conducted autopsies on Princess Diana. He went out to do the 9/11 autopsies. He was like one of the most well-esteemed forensic pathologists. And this is a memoir of his life. And honestly, the stuff he talks about is so interesting. It is quite dense if you read it physically. I would recommend the audiobook as he does narrate that. But I think the chances are if you like thriller books, you'd probably find like this subject matter interesting. The Magpies by Mark Edwards is actually the first book that I think I read from him. I'm sure this came out in like 2014 or something. And this is one of the best domestic thrillers I've read. I actually did a reread of it last year and still it got my heckles up. We meet a young couple called Jamie and Kirsty. They have just bought their dream home in London and as you can imagine, they're really excited. And when they get there, they meet their new neighbours from the flat and their neighbours are called Lucy and Chris. What they don't know is Lucy and Chris are their neighbours from hell. They start leaving rats on their doorstep. They start complaining about the noise that Jamie and Kirsty are making when actually they aren't really making much noise. If you imagine the worst possible neighbour you could have, times it by 1,000, you would end up with Lucy and Chris. Now this is one of those thriller books that hasn't got this big plot twist in it. It's kind of, you've just got that dread of leading up to like what you know is coming. And I love that in a thriller book. I know that thriller books are always associated with like these big plot twists that just blow us away, but sometimes it's just that feeling of dread and I love it. I eat it up. And this is a perfect example of that. Lucy, who is one of the characters in this book, she's the nightmare neighbour. She actually makes an appearance in The Psychopath Next Door, which I read in my new release reading vlog. I'll link it up above. She's a side character in it. And she is just the most despicable woman to ever exist. Going back to John Marrs, we have not just a 5-star book, my favourite thriller book of all time. One of my favourite books of all time. And obviously, if you've watched any of my videos, you will know it is the one. I bang on about this book all the fucking time because honestly, it is the best thriller book I've ever read. It is perfection in a thriller book. And don't tell me you don't like it because I will cry. This is another one of John Marrs's like speculative thrillers. So this is set in the same world as The Family Experiment where it's like very near future, could potentially become a reality. And in this book, scientists have just discovered DNA matching, which basically means if you take a mouth swab, they will find you your soulmate. They will find you your one true love by your DNA. So we're following 5 couples who have just been matched with their soulmate. And one of them is a serial killer with a police officer. Because I'm not being funny or nothing. A simple DNA swab does not determine the ethical person of the person that you're going to be with. The chapters are just so short. Every chapter you're following one of the 5 couples and they all end on cliffhangers and you just have to keep turning those pages. If you haven't read this book, this is your sign. I don't particularly like the Netflix series. People are always like, oh, well, I didn't like the Netflix series. Neither did I. It's completely different. Don't let that put you off. Pick up the book. If you're on Book Talk, then I'm pretty sure you have seen the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. Now, I gave this whole book series 5 stars because it's essentially 5 novellas and they form one big book, like an 800-page book. And listen, I don't know who I was at that time. Would I give it 5 stars now? Probably not. But I just remember having a great time reading this book. It basically follows an FBI detective who is on the hunt for this serial killer who is like killing people like savagely. And what he doesn't know is the woman he's actually dating is the serial killer. So if you like a good for her, women getting revenge on men, you'd probably like this. I actually think they're all on Kindle Unlimited, and if you just have to like a quick light read, this is probably a good one to start with. Actually, I take that back. It's not light. It's actually very dark. Please check content warnings before you read these books. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman is one of the bleakest, unsatisfactory books I've ever read. So tell me why I gave it 5 stars. This is a book that I'm not joking. I think about like daily, maybe not daily, like at least once a week I think about this book and I'm just like, oh, and then I just get this sad feeling in my heart. It's just a book that is going to stay with me forever. The book starts out and there are 39 women and 1 child who are locked in a cage underground. They don't know how long they've been there, they don't know why they're there, and they don't know who put them there. One day an alarm goes off, the doors open and they are free. But what is waiting for them outside of this cage, they could never have expected. I don't know if this would be classed as a thriller book. I would say it's definitely more like literary, but maybe like a literary thriller. It'll be a modern classic, I am sure. I'm just cheating again, but I'm going to throw another non-fiction recommendation in here because I think all you thriller lovers will love it. And that is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doherty. Caitlin Doherty is actually the Caitlin Doherty from Ask a Mortician, which is a YouTuber who I used to watch all the time. And when I actually picked up this book, I didn't know that she was the author, so I love that. Basically, Caitlin Doherty was a mortician, and this is a memoir all about her time as a mortician, and it's just so interesting. She also talks about like the history of death in other cultures, which I found fascinating, and it was just a really, really good time. She actually narrates the audiobook herself, so if you're a fan of audiobooks, try it on audio. Now, I think this is actually the only YA book on this list, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I don't really read much YA anymore because my criticism of them is it feels too YA, and like that's not a fair criticism. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're literally marketed as a YA thriller, so I have kind of stopped reading them, but A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is one of my favourites. Specifically book 1, this is part of a series, there's 3 books in the series, and I think Holly Jackson just went off on a tangent with like the last one especially, but the first book will forever be my favourite. We meet a girl called Pip who for a school project is investigating the murder of one of their schoolmates. She was an older girl and she was supposedly killed by her boyfriend. I mean, I want to know what school are letting you investigate a murder for your school project, but I digress. Anyway, she doesn't believe that the person that's in prison did commit the murder of this girl. So she goes on her own detective mission. I think part of why I love this book so much is told through mixed media. So you're getting like extracts of like Pip's reports that she's writing. You're getting transcripts of interviews, and I love mixed media in thriller books. This has now been turned into a series on BBC, but I've not seen it. Have you seen it? Let me know. The Pact by Sharon Bolton is actually my favourite book by Sharon Bolton, and it follows a group of friends who have just broken up for their summer holidays. I think they're like 18, and they are taking part in daredevil stunts. They're daring each other to do wild things, and they're just getting more and more extreme. One of these daredevil pranks ends up with a woman and her child dying. So obviously they are in shit. But Megan, one of the girls, says, listen guys, I'll take the fall. I'll go to prison. I mean, good friend. On the condition that when I get out of prison, you each all owe me a favour. We then fast forward 20 years in the future. Megan's out of prison and she's like, time's up bitches, pay me what you owe me. I recommend this book all the time. Everyone tells me that they absolutely love it. I'm recommending it to you. The Maid by Nita Prose could be the newest addition to this list, maybe. This is a cozy mystery series that I put off reading for the longest time, and you know, more for me. We meet the best character. We meet a woman named Molly the maid, if you will. She works in a hotel and she has just come across a dead body in one of the rooms as she's gone to clean it. But the catch is she's now the #1 suspect. People think that she did the murder. But Molly is just this amazing character. She's neurodivergent. She doesn't think like everyone else. Everything is either black or white to her, and she is incredible. I always liken her to Strange Sally Diamond, if you read that, by Liz Nugent. I love her. I love this book so much. I actually read like the entire series. There's another full-length book out and a novella. I read them all in December, and the last book comes out this year and I'm really sad. If you're into cozy mysteries with just like really good characters, then pick this book up. Lisa Jewell, My Queen, None of This Is True is my favourite book, I think, by her. This book is completely different to anything that Lisa Jewell has done before. This is told through mixed media, so while it has got like your typical like novel format, we've also got extracts of a podcast, we've got interviews, and it's incredible. It's also one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. We meet a woman called Josie as she is in a pub celebrating her 40th birthday, and then when she goes to the toilet she meets a woman called Alex who's also celebrating her 40th birthday. So they are birthday twins. However, their lives could not be more different. Josie is just getting by, she's in a relationship she's not very happy in, and Alex is a successful podcaster. So Josie convinces Alex to do a podcast all about them called Hi, I'm Your Birthday Twin. But how much of what Josie is telling is the truth? Perhaps none of it. This is currently being turned into a Netflix series. I'm so excited. Netflix, do not fuck it up. Right, you know at the beginning of this video I said I'm recommending you these books with chest. Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison, I am not recommending to you with chest. Most people who I have recommended this book to have not liked it. I think it's a bit of a Marmite book. To me, I think it's incredible. It was my best book of 2023. But you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. It's technically classed as a horror, but, you know, this is my video. I can include it. I would say it's more thriller, personally. I think all of Rachel Harrison's books are more like thriller versus horror. We meet a girl called Vesper who has escaped her cult family, and like that's like she genuinely escaped her cult family. Like they were real life cults. When she left, her family said like, you are never welcome back, like you can never ever come back to this place. But she's just received an invitation to her cousin's wedding, so obviously she's like, well, I thought I wasn't allowed back. So she's gonna go back and see what's going down. When I found out what the cult was in this book, I was shooketh. My jaw was on the floor. I think if people tell you what the cult in this book is, it's a spoiler. So obviously I'm not going to tell you. But just beware of like Goodreads and stuff, because people do put it in their review. And I'm like, I think that's a spoiler in my opinion. So if you're a fan of like complex family drama, cults in your books, try this out. And if you don't like it, don't say I didn't warn you. Just touching on another Rachel Harrison book while we're here, and that is Cackle. And this is a cozy, witchy, feminist horror. Again, I wouldn't really class it as a horror. Basically, we meet Annie, who is just turned 30. Her boyfriend split up with her, so she's moved to a small town to start her new life. She meets a woman called Sophie, who may or may not be the town witch. Everyone is scared of her. And it is just not a coming of age story, because I mean like she's in her 30s, but like a story about finding yourself. I think if you're a similar age, then you may be able to relate to this. It's just a wholesome time. I actually have a tattoo of one of the characters in this book, Ralph. If you know, you know. Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister is one of the cleverest books I've ever read. It's the most incredibly plotted book I've ever read. This has been out for a few years, and I feel like I was one of the last people to read it. And the reason is, I'll tell you what the book's about. So basically we meet a mum who looks out of her bedroom window and she sees her son stabbing someone. She sees him killing someone. So obviously she's like, shit. She then does what she needs to do. She goes to bed and she wakes up the next day, but it's the day before the murder happened. And then she goes to bed that day and it's the day before that. And we literally just keep going further and further back in time, and she needs to change the outcome so basically her son doesn't kill someone. And the reason I put off reading this for the longest time was because I didn't realise that we played with time that much. I thought it was kind of like a Groundhog Day situation and she would just wake up and it was the same day over and over, but that's not the case. So if you've thought that as well, don't let that put you off. It's also set in Liverpool and the Wirral, which is where I live. So like a lot of the places that were being mentioned, I could visualise, like I've been to them, and I don't think I've ever had that in a thriller book before. And I don't know, it just made it feel like more real. It's a magical realism thriller book, but sure. Please don't cancel me, but Verity by Colleen Hoover. I don't care what people say. I do care what people say about Colleen Hoover, because I agree she is a very, very bad person. She's not a great person. But Verity, You could convince me that she didn't write it. I mean, come on, think about it. Like, when you think of all of Colleen Hoover's books, like, they're all like they're romancy, like they're not really thrillers. And Verity is completely different. So allegedly, I don't think she wrote it. At least that's what I'm telling myself in my head. We meet a woman named Lowen, and she has just been hired to be the ghostwriter for a woman named Verity, who is a best-selling author. But Verity is now in a coma, so she can't finish her book. So Lowen's been hired to finish her book for her. So she has to move into Verity's house so she can go through all of her notes, go through everything to make sure that the book is as accurate as possible. But she starts to suspect that Verity may or may not actually be in a coma. I think this is one of the best thriller books I've ever read, and I don't know what that says about me, but The Stranger in a House by John Mars, except this is one of his psychological thrillers, not the near future ones. And I think this is actually the only psychological thriller that I've given 5 stars from him. If you're looking for a book that's going to make you feel rage like no other, then look no further. I think I went through every single emotion reading this book. Like, at one point, multiple points, I wanted to throw my book across the room. We meet a woman named Connie, and her mum sadly has dementia, so she's taking care of her, but they are struggling with things around the house. So a charity has sent a man named Paul to help out with like handyman type shit. And then Gwen starts to suspect that Paul like might be trying to worm his way in like a bit too much. She thinks he might be a con man. And you are not prepared for the twists and turns that you will go through reading this book. This one's on Kindle Unlimited, so if you needed an even more of a sign to read it, there is. Another criminally underrated, not spoken about a book enough is The Ugly Truth by Elsie North. This is a book that is told entirely through mixed media. Clearly I love mixed media. A C-list celebrity, is that harsh? I don't know, has gone missing. Her name is Melanie Lang, and her family have said that she's gone off to a mental health facility to take care of herself. However, people don't think that's the truth. They think she might have been taken. This gives Free Britney vibes. That's the best way I can describe it. Like, it takes a look at the dark side of celebrity culture. So if that is interesting to you, you would enjoy this. Like, if you were interested in the whole like conveyorship that Britney Spears went through, I feel like it's like that, but in book form. Elsie North actually has another book called Clickbait, which I also really enjoyed. I didn't give it 5 stars, but that is like Kardashian-esque. So if you're a fan of the Kardashians, you might like that one. I think you should read Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothschild in the summer, as it's set in Miami and it's just all the vibes. We meet a woman named Ruby who is accused of killing 4 people, but she actually only killed 3. That's not a spoiler, that's literally the tagline for the book. But essentially, the one murder that she did not commit is going to be the one that sends her down. Again, this is on Kindle Unlimited, and again, if you are a fan of character-driven thriller books, I would say this is more character-driven versus plot, then yeah, you'll eat this up. But save it for the summer, because the summer vibes are immaculate. No One Saw a Thing by Andrea Mara is a fast-paced popcorn thriller that I did not expect to give 5 stars when I picked it up. We meet a woman who is in London. She's there for her husband's work, and her and her 2 kids are getting on a train. She puts the 2 kids on and the doors shut, leaving the kids on the train and her on the platform. She rushes for help and she goes to meet her children at the next platform. But when she gets there, only one of the kids is there. So what happened to the other one? The other child says that she didn't see anything, so where is she? This was the first book I actually read from Andrea Mara, and it's still my favourite. I still love her, but I think she's an amazing author. She's an Irish author, and yeah, really good. Fast-paced popcorn thriller. If you're in a slump, this would be perfect. We're back with Mark Edwards, and this one is here to stay. And this will make you feel rage. A man and a woman have just got married. They're living in newlywed bliss when the wife is like, oh, my family need to come and stay for a few days. So obviously the husband's like, yeah, sure. But they don't leave. The sister won't leave the bedroom. She won't talk to anyone. And they are just genuinely the in-laws from hell. And it's just one of those situations where you're like, what would you actually do if this happened to you? Like, what would you do if like one of your in-laws just moved in and wouldn't leave? Like, imagine the strain that would put on your relationship. While we're here, we may as well get the 2 other Mark Edwards out of the way that are on this list. The next one is The House Guest. Now, this one's set in New York. I think it's actually Mark Edwards' like only one that isn't set in the UK. So this is set in New York, but it's a British couple who are house sitting their friend's house in New York. One night there's a storm, somebody knocks on the door, and they say that they know the owners of the house and like they were expecting to see them. Please can they come in? They've got nowhere else to go. So obviously our British couple are like, sure, come in. Do you want a cup of tea? Except is she telling the truth? Because they start getting a bit suspicious and like, is she who she says she is? I'm going to reread this because I think it was like back in like 2018 I read this, and I'm going to reread it because I remember loving it. And the last one by Mark Edwards is Follow You Home. This follows a couple who have been travelling through Europe, and one night they get kicked off a train in the middle of nowhere and have to find their way home basically. But when they get back to England, they suspect that something might have followed them home. All of Mark Edwards' books are on Kindle Unlimited, and most of them come with the audio as well, and I love that. Okay, moving on, a book that I will fight for, and that is The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard. Now, this gets such low reviews because people don't understand the twist. And like, if you're reading the book properly, there's no way you can't understand it. Like, it's not a book problem. It's a you problem. No, I'm joking. But like, so many people have messaged me and they're like, oh, I didn't get the twist. And then I explain it and they're like, oh yeah. So like, it's just one of those books that you just have to read like properly, you know? Not that I'm saying people don't read books properly. I'm gonna shut up. We meet a girl whose sister has gone missing. She went missing after a night out. She was walking home and they think that she hitchhiked and somebody has took her. So now our main character, her sister, is going and trying to trap people. She's walking the same streets her sister did. She's trying to trap them, if you will, to try and find the person that took her sister. It's just such a powerful thriller. Like, as soon as I got to the twist in this book, I was like, 5 stars, literally 5 stars. Like, no, that it has to be. I can't give it anything less. I love Catherine Ryan Howard as an author, and I've only got a couple of books left to read in her backlist, so I need to read those ASAP. Next of Kin by Kira Abdullah, I think is actually the only legal thriller that I've got on this list. So if you're a fan of legal thrillers, then I've got you. This follows a woman called Layla who gets a phone call from her brother-in-law and it says, please can you take your nephew to nursery? I've got an emergency at work. So obviously she's like, yeah, fine. But when she's taking her son to nursery, she gets a phone call from her work saying that there's an emergency and can she get to the office as soon as possible. And then it gets to lunchtime and she gets a phone call from her brother-in-law and he's like, hello, like, where's your nephew? You haven't dropped him off at nursery. She's left him in the fucking car. She's left him in the car on the hottest day of the year. Sadly, he passes away, and then you would think that it's like a pretty cut and dry book, right? No. This is one of the most tense, twisty thrillers I've ever read. It's incredible. I literally couldn't put the book down. I was like, turning the page as fast as I could. Is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo classed as a thriller? I don't know, but maybe. But it's my favourite book of all time, so. Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult is actually the first book I read by Jodi Picoult, and wow, this is one of the most powerful books I've ever read. It follows a woman named Olivia whose son is accused of killing his girlfriend. He's accused of killing his girlfriend by pushing her down the stairs. So this is a legal thriller. That Next of Kin wasn't the only legal thriller. I lied. It's multiple points of view. Olivia is a beekeeper, which is why it's called Mad Honey. You'll learn facts about bees that you didn't know that you needed to know, but will love anyway. And I just think that the message in this story is really important. I can't say what that message is because it's a spoiler. Just trust me. It is quite like a heavy, dense book. So like if you're looking for like a quick read, this is not it. Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney was my best book of 2024. I think I've spoken about it in every video I've done, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but it basically follows an author who's struggling to write his next book. So he goes to an island in Scotland to try and finish it, where he thinks he sees his missing wife while he's there. It's incredible. It's Alice Feeney's best book yet. Go read it. Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough was the OG thriller book with this twist. Like, so many thriller books have tried to like take this twist and like put it in their books, and it doesn't work. Sarah Pinborough is the OG. This is one of the best thriller book twists I've ever read. I think you should go into this book blind, because if I tell you what the book's about, like it's not going to do it justice. It actually makes it sound pretty shit. Sounds like a domestic thriller. So I think you should go into this book blind. There is a Netflix series which actually does do the book justice. It's not very often I say that, but it actually really does do it justice. Me and Amy watched it over Christmas, did a rewatch of it, and it's still amazing. Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. We follow a woman who is a really successful businesswoman. She owns like a chain of hair salons across America. Her and her husband are like absolutely killing it. But then her little boy goes missing. We then fast forward a year later and our main character is obviously still like in grief. She's not got over it, as you wouldn't. The case has never been solved, but is it about to be? I would say this is like the least dark maybe of Jennifer Hillier's books, but I don't remember much about it, I'll be honest. But I gave it 5 stars according to Goodreads. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell is a real character-driven book about cults. So if cults are your thing, cults are my thing, then I would recommend this book to you. I always find with Lisa Jewell's books, they're like quite slow-paced. So if you're looking again for like a fast-paced page-turning book, this is not it. But basically, Libby has just turned 25. Libby's adopted. She knows she's adopted. And she's just found out that she's inherited her family's home in Chelsea. Like Chelsea, London. So basically she's minted. But her family were part of a cult and she was the only survivor of like a mass suicide, if you like. She was a baby, I think she was like 1, and she was found in her cot. So this is the house that like her parents killed themselves in. And people have been waiting for the day that she's turned 25 and inherits this house. There is actually a sequel to this as well. The sequel's called The Family Remains. That's also really good. I didn't give it 5 stars, I gave it 4, but still a really good book. And the last one on this list is actually, again, a horror. But I don't know why is these books categorized as horror? In my humble opinion, in my irrelevant opinion, I wouldn't really say that they're horror, but that is Hidden Pictures by Jason Reculat. This follows a girl called Mallory as she gets a job as a nanny for a young boy named Teddy, but he starts drawing like weird things on the walls and like they're getting weirder and weirder and weirder. But the thing is, the book comes with the pictures. Like you literally get like full-size pictures of what Teddy is drawing on the walls, and they are terrifying. Maybe that's why it's classed as a horror, actually. Maybe I just answered my own question, because yeah, some of these pictures are pretty dark. I know this book had its moment in like 2023, but like it's one of those books like I still remember everything about. I haven't forgotten any of it, and I think that says a lot really when half of these books I've told you about I've not been able to remember the endings. God, if you are still here, you are a real one. Thank you so much. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I'm going to guess it's long. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really hope you found this list helpful and you find some amazing thriller books. Please hit the subscribe button. Please like this video if you found it helpful, and I shall see you next time.